voice of FinTech.
Welcome to Voice of FinTech, a podcast mapping out the Swiss and global FinTech scene, connecting FinTech enthusiasts with startups, incubators, accelerators, business angels and VCs, and incumbents interested in partnerships. Voice of FinTech will help you navigate the FinTech ecosystem. Here you can listen to the startup founder stories, what investors and incumbents are looking for when dealing with startups, and find out more about resources provided by incubators and accelerators. My name is Rudy Falad and I'll be hosting this podcast. Hello and welcome to Voice of FinTech. Today's episode is a special one because here the FinTech will meet MusicTech, and we're going to talk to Guillaume, who is the founder of Vialma. It's a classical music streaming service. We're going to find out how is that relevant for FinTech and finance and the business, how his business helps the artists and the consumers to get the best out of classical music out there. So I'm very curious to find out about something quite original and new like this. So how are you today?
Great. Thank you for hosting me.
So can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So my name is Guillaume Descottes. I'm 39. I founded Vialma 5 years ago. And prior to that, I used to work in private equity and venture capital, and French and Swiss.
All right. And you mentioned you worked in private equity. When people go to banking, they dream about going to private equity or these days to venture capital. So why did you decide to start your own business and not to stay on as an investor?
That's a very good question. I think actually that the truth is that I always wanted to be an entrepreneur, and I thought that venture capital and private equity would be a very good training in order to know how to do it. But then I quickly realized that being in private equity is like flying on a plane, and you look at problems from the sky, and there's a moment where you need to jump. And so you jump with a parachute or without a parachute. It depends how prepared you are. In my case, I realized quickly that even with all the hard work, despite all the hard work that I had put in the past, it was more without a parachute. There's a moment where you decide to jump.
Okay, that's a nice way of putting it. So what is Vialma? Are you a problem solver or are you delighting the customers? What's the goal here?
I think it's a very important question, what you say, because we don't always have to solve a problem. I think it became the gold book or even the red book in a way, because it becomes almost compulsory for venture capital firms when they investigate your business. But when you open a 3-star Michelin restaurant, you're not actually solving a problem. It's more about what you bring to people, and which is so valuable that you will create value. So on our side, we have two businesses. First, B2C side of things, and then a B2B side of things. For B2C, we enrich people's lives thanks to classical music and jazz by making it relevant to their activities, their interests and leisure, so that we're both educational and inspirational. So it's Americans have a very good way to put it. It's called edutainment. It's when you're educational as well as entertaining. So we would definitely be on the side where we delight people and we bring them something meaningful for their lives. And for B2B, because we built this streaming platform, which costs quite a lot of money, it becomes very useful for cultural institutions, which have the same issue as we have. They're bringing an experience which is extremely valuable to their audience. And so we empower cultural institutions in their relationship with their audience so that they can generate sustainable revenues online thanks to our platform that we sell to them as a white label. So the expression SaaS, software as a service, where in a way what we're doing is streaming as a service.
All right. So we'll get into this also where you are today and all this. And generally, founders already reached a certain level. They like to talk about that and how it's going to be even better going forward. But I also would like to know for people who are just thinking about starting something like you, how have you started your venture? What were your very first steps?
So we started a bit more than 5 years ago, and I must say that the first steps were very challenging. Some people might say that you always need to pivot 1 million times, but this is also another red book idea. I think it's very important to be as flexible and as agile as possible. That's very true. But it can also make a lot of sense to build things step by step So on our side, what we found at the very beginning of Vialma is that we thought that people were not necessarily talking about classical music and jazz in a way which was relevant to people's lives. And so this is the first thing that we did. We built a newsletter. We collected some emails from Facebook. And we talked differently about classical music and jazz, which made that we had really nice statistics of engagement and some labels seeing what we were doing, trusted us. And so we signed our first agreements, which made that we could start to raise a bit of money to build a proper streaming service, which helped us get some first genuine paying subscribers. With that, we could improve the customer experience because we had data, which improved the software. So we had even more labels and more prestigious labels to come on board. And in a way, we made it step by step, trying as much as possible to be able to rely on those steps that we were making. It's like having a brick of a wall made of bricks, and you start with one brick per one brick, and you try to make those bricks as solid as possible. And actually, I would really like to thank the ones who trusted us 5 years ago, because when you have your 3 bricks at the very beginning and it doesn't look like a wall at all, you have to be quite bold to trust the guys who are building it. And so I would like to thank, for example, Naxos, the first distributor who trusted us at the very beginning of our journey.
But if I rephrase it and zoom in on step 0, it sounds like you first built the community. Was this like a debate club or a chat room about classical music? And then you went to potential partners to build a streaming service.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We started by building a community online who was very engaged, and they were telling us themselves what they wanted to do, and then we built the streaming service which would fit that the needs and the desires of this very first community.
All right, and why Vialma, right? Why classical music streaming? Because sometimes when people want to start their business, they experience a problem and they test it with other people. There are other people who just read something and they see that, oh my God, this is growing. I need to be part of this. But I don't know whether classical music could ever trigger this. It is quite a different beast. Why this particular business?
So first, for classical music and jazz and most art forms, actually, there are always dedicated environments before tech. So classical music lovers and jazz lovers, they would have their own magazine, their own venues, their own radio stations. So every single media has been dedicated, and it goes the same with literature, with the paintings. So in a way, it makes sense that there is a dedicated service. And I'm actually reverting to you the question: it's why not in a world where you have general streaming services offering all types of music? Why not do the same that in other formats? So that's the first thing. And the second is that if you don't have a dedicated streaming service, then as classical music and jazz are not the most prominent music form streamed today, it makes that the work of the artists are quite diluted, and they don't have enough exposure, and they don't have the means to really create their own environment and be heard. And that's why it makes a lot of sense to have a dedicated service. You were saying like how it links to the artist remuneration and the business model. It's thanks to dedicated streaming services for any form of music. Actually, it doesn't have to be only for classical and jazz, that the artists of those music forms would be able to get a higher remuneration. So today, for example, we've been paying more than 4 cents per stream. So that's 20 or 30 times more than what Spotify or Deezer or other general streaming platforms can pay directly to artists and independent labels. We would like to go even further than this by promoting a user-centric approach. And so user-centric, it means that, which is actually what happens in life. You pay a CD in a store, the money goes to the people who produce that CD. And today with streaming, when you listen to an artist, it's diluted in a big pot. And so even if you stream only one artist, if the rest of the world streams 1 million artists, it's going to dilute your own money as a customer into the big basket of streaming. With user-centric, the remuneration, what the customer pays, would go directly to the artists who were streamed. And we believe that it creates way more value in 2 ways. First, artists are more in control of what's going on. And second, the labels themselves, they can better monitor how they promote albums and how they back artists, because they will have a very clear visibility on the remuneration and the return on investment of their production.
All right, so maybe let's just rephrase the first thing. So you say the classical or jazz music fans, they have their own venues or outlets, how they, for example, connect with the music, right? You can also put kids into a music school. They like it, and then they keep on liking it, hopefully for the rest of their lives, or they have magazines and press and networks and all that. And basically what you do is you digitize it.
Yeah.
So I think it's even a better way to discover new classical music, or if there is a new but something you didn't know before. So I understand that. Now let's press on a little bit on that dedicated classical music. You've already explained it, but maybe if we tweak it a little bit. So if you compare to biggest or big streaming platforms, they have all kinds of music there, right? Mm-hmm. So there is a rock music, there is pop music, all that stuff. I don't know about streaming service just for the pop. Would that make sense, though, for these big companies? They have a same amount of overhead, right? Whether they add the classical music or pop or whatever, and spread out this overhead over this kind of classical categories of music rather than having a dedicated channel. On the other hand, if I were you, I would be fishing for an answer by comparing it to the radios, where you have radios that are dedicated just to jazz or classical music. Mm-hmm. So how do they survive versus the general ones? They're also the pop and other things. Let's look at it from a perspective of a business as well. You're right. You said the artists don't have enough prominence on the general platforms, but what about the economics of running a business? Like maybe does this classical music really warrant a separate platform? Can that be better done on these? Maybe there are things have to be done and accommodated they haven't done yet, or on Spotify, or you think that you'll be big enough to survive and to thrive on your own?
Okay, so one way to answer this is that I know quite well people from Deezer. Really respect what they're doing. It's a great job. And at the same time, as classical music and jazz are not that prominent out of everything which is streamed, on their side, they have one person dedicated to curating content for classical music and jazz lovers. On our side, we are 5 and we're a startup. So we're producing way more content, and our editorialization capacity is actually stronger than the leaders for a very specific field. And today, the curation and the editorialization is very important, because the biggest catalog of music in the world is not actually behind a paywall. It's YouTube. If the depth of catalog cannot be the unique client promise that you're giving to your customers, you need to give more. And this is where curation takes a huge part. Curation and original content. For original content in music, it's very difficult because there are so many recordings of Mozart, so you would need, the interests are diverging. A musician does not have the same interest as giving an exclusivity for music than a film director would have in producing a film only for Netflix, for example. But curation and editorialization is absolutely key, and there is a time management issue for big players. And as classical and jazz represent less than 2% of the total streams that they have, it cannot represent more than 2% of their time if we make it super quick.
All right, and you talk about user centric, and so who are your target customers or users in terms of demographics or other metrics that you look at?
Mm-hmm. So we have several personas. The two main ones we focus on today are curious minds and passionate music lovers. We think actually that in the classical world, people focus too much on experts. And the expertise it's not the same relationship. I'm crazy about wine, I'm passionate, but I'm also an expert, and I'm not sure that I'm profitable for all my friends who have cellars, because I compare the prices of the wine, I go online. There's always another way to find satisfaction if you really an expert. But if you're passionate and you're driven by your emotions, then there's the pleasure of sharing, there's the pleasure of living something together with other people. And if you're a curious mind, the curation and the editorialization, because you don't know that much, is absolutely key, so that you don't get lost in the vast ocean of hundreds of thousands of works and hundreds of thousands of technical terms. It's like you're entering a wine shop, if I can continue the parallel, and then someone would explain you straight away all the climates of Burgundy. You'll have a headache. And these would be our two main customers. Then, in terms of age bracket, as you asked for demographics, we know that classical music and jazz have a problem about age, and that the population is aging with time, and it's very important that the new generation comes in. So they would focus a lot on young people. We think that there is actually an intermediate stage, people who are 40 plus, and who used to, back in the days, 1-2 generations before, move on to classical music and jazz as they were getting older, and they have a purchasing power. But they haven't done that switch in the past generation, at least. Would prefer to go to the Rolling Stones, to a very expensive concert, and to listen to some nostalgic and some music from their younger days. And so we think that the first step is to accompany this age bracket in making them understand how they will benefit from delving into those art forms, and that's our main focus today. And why? Also because they have a pretty high purchasing power, and they would definitely be up for paying a subscription for Spotify for their children, for example. So they would have a family package, and they would have their own streaming service on top of things dedicated to classical and jazz, and to their own discovery. Just as much as in a family, in the USA, people subscribe to Netflix, to Amazon Prime, so the number of subscriptions with cable TV and SVOD is definitely not one. And so far, in music, there is one service, but we clearly see today that there is an appetite for having several streaming services, which would bring you several different pleasures.
That's very interesting, because when I used to go before pandemic to Tonhalle here in Zurich for concerts, of course, you could see on a normal day, on a weekday, the audience average was maybe around 65. Mm-hmm. But then they also do quarterly events, which are called Tonhalle Late, and they are specifically designed to address this problem, be more accessible to young people. So the dress code is more relaxed. It starts at 10 p.m. It's 1 hour of classical music and 1 hour of some sort of electronic dance music and things like this. And they also align it with the film festival and things like this. That's where the young people come in. But the people around 40, 45, I don't think that there is any specific program for this, or anybody thought about it, right? So you either go from 65 to below 30, but in between, there are just a few people there. And also a good point on multiple streaming services. Nowadays, you don't need to commit for a year, right? You can go back and forth every month. I've seen a research that in the US, the average streaming, the movie streaming subscriptions is 2.2. It's not an annual subscription model, which leads me to my next question. How do you make money? And we already alluded to it, that it's a subscription model, but let's also talk about one thing which used to be maybe in the good old days, that you had to subscribe for something for a year, or you could only get out of it after 3 months or something. Now I think it's a lot more flexible. So how is that for you, though?
Yep. So we sell subscriptions, and we have different packages. So we have a package dedicated to classical or dedicated to jazz, which starts at €5.90 per month, or £5.90 per month, and then you can get everything at €9.90, audio and video and classical and jazz. That's one thing which is very important for Vialma and for our customers, is that we're multimedia by design. It's a trend which is coming. Amazon offers music and video. Apple offers now video, music, video games, sports, etc. So we need to bundle the formats in order to create a genuine digital experience, which is really compelling. So these are our two price points, and for us, it's very important to have a price point which is below $9.90, because this is the target for all streaming services, Spotify, Deezer, everybody's at $9.99. And so if we want to make it interesting for people to have an extra one on top of Spotify, I think that doubling it by another one at $9.99 is quite difficult at the beginning. And then when they see the value, especially since we offer a multimedia experience, which would not be the case for Spotify, then this is where they will upgrade, but they would go step by step. So first with an affordable price plan, and then afterwards the full package. And on top of things, it's funny what you say about the need for flexibility. It's very true. So the ultimate layer actually is when people are very convinced that Vialma is great, then they will pay yearly so that they can save 2 months, and everybody has a nice. So everybody has an interest. It's also nice for our development to have the payment upfront, and at the same time they make some savings. So I think that every step of the way, it's very important to offer something which is meaningful and sufficient to what your customers need at a certain point in time, knowing that you'll be there as they will progress and they will ask for more. So again, I was talking about this staircase, going step by step for the startup, for the journey of a startup. And I think it's the same thing for the journey of a customer.
So that's on the B2C side. So monthly or yearly, if you subscribe yearly, you can save money. But what about the B2B? How does that work with them? Do you charge them a fee as well, your business partners, or what?
Yeah, so we build white label streaming services, and it would be a flat fee renewed yearly, just like a subscription.
And what's the example of white labeling? Are you going to say that you are FNAC streaming and it's Vialma behind it, or what?
Well, actually, we do the streaming service of Opéra de Paris for their private sponsor, for their sponsors and their donors. We do streaming services for private banks, which would already have a pretty big involvement in the arts and music, and they would need to talk about their values and how art is meaningful to them in a different way. It's before COVID, of course, but it's a long-term trend. COVID accelerated a much anticipated switch from physical to digital. But let's say in the 90s or early 2000, you would invite your customers with special concert tickets with champagne, and you would have a chat in between a theater play or a music concert. And today you have to multiply the touch points that you will have, and you have to be present in your customer's mind way more often than just bringing them to the opera once a year. And this is where Vialma plays a role, so that you can still express the same values about how you're sponsoring the arts and how meaningful it is for you, but at the same time on a much more regular basis. You don't have to be an art sponsor. So we work for companies which are not that involved with the arts, but they like their values fit in fit in what classical music can bring. So, for example, if you have among your values the fact that you're selling a peace of mind because your service is helping people, your customers, go faster or remove all the red tape, etc. Well, classical music is a nice fit because in everybody's mind, it's very relaxing. I have to say that not all classical music is relaxing, and I wonder if people would think that Wagner would fit, but you have some special tempos which fit in very nicely to make people unwind.
All right, which leads me to one small follow-up question. How is the sound quality, right? Because people who listen to classical music maybe are a little bit more demanding than if you listen to dance music or something like this on the iPhone. So is this a point of debate, or that's sorted?
Yeah. The minimum quality, like the lowest we offer, is 320 kilobyte per second, which is the highest of Spotify, what they consider as high quality on mobile. And for us, it's default. And then you can listen in FLAC, which is lossless quality. And for mobile, for the moment, as long as there is not the 5G deployed everywhere, we don't think it's relevant to offer high res because some people might be ready to pay for it. But actually, the client promise of guaranteeing that they will be able to stream high res in good conditions is not met. So we evolve as tech evolves and the bandwidth increases. We're totally up for the increase of audio quality. That said, I don't want to get too much into technical details, but the CD quality was already way more than what an ear can cope with in terms of sound at a given point in time. So it's already great. We would not be the ones saying that other services have a desperately low audio quality and that it's horrendous and that it's killing Mozart. It's not the way we see it. The way we see it is the more you can, the better it is. But if we go step by step, again, again, following the same reasoning. The first question is, why would you need to listen to Mozart during your day? And then second is, what would be the works which you would enjoy the most? Once you like a work, who is the performer who's doing the job which is the most meaningful to you? And we would never say at Vialma, this is the best performance, because it's such a hard take to say such a thing. But we would say, what's the most meaningful performance for you? For example, one of my favorite pieces is it's Beethoven's violin concerto, and he made a piano version actually before releasing the violin concerto, and it's very rare. And you've got some pianists trying this piece, and it's beautiful. It's very meaningful to me. And then ultimately, once you've done all this work, and that you really don't want to miss on any detail of your favorite performer, then this is where it makes a lot of sense to have the best possible audio quality.
All right, but if I summarize it, you say your default is the best Spotify level. Mm-hmm. Now you say to go higher up, it depends, because you don't have the internet everywhere, in terms of 5G, etc. But what if nowadays people work more from home, they have a Wi-Fi, etc. So is this worthwhile to go and upgrade for a better quality if you're at home and you listen to it on a Wi-Fi?
I would always recommend people, if they can, to invest in a better audio system, for sure. But and that's why also we're offering lossless. So Apple just announced this week that they would do lossless at the same price at $9.90. We've been offering this for a very long time already, so we're totally up for quality. My point is that quality cannot be only restricted to audio and technical quality. Actually, you've got some jobs in the music world. Nobody talk about it, but it's paramount. Brendel, he would never travel without his piano tuner, and he would. And I know a lot of great pianists who would pay a very close attention to who's tuning the piano. They would never record anything without a sound engineer that they haven't checked before, because it's absolutely key. You have to, before you have a very high output, you need to have an input which is the best, and that requires it's a proper skill which is very demanding to be a very good sound engineer. And so we think that it would be unfair for music and for any art which requires audio to rely on the technical side of things. And that's why I was saying, like, we would always promote everybody plays a role in a listener having an amazing experience listening to a performance.
Maybe again from a simple user experience. So you say we shouldn't focus only on the technical aspects. Of course not. It was just one question. It doesn't mean it's all encompassing question. So the other one is, all right, which pieces do I like? What music do I like? And then who performed it? So first thing is, if I then compare it to Netflix or anybody else, they also have suggestions for you, even though they say these are suggestions and based on what you watched before. By the way, I may have watched it, but I didn't like it. But fair enough. They also say if you rate, you will get better recommendations, right? Is this part of your curation process as well? Maybe, let's say I had the 10-year break from classical music. I remember something, and then I'll start listening to it on your platform. Will your then platform tell me more tips like this that I could like? That's one question. And the second thing is, what about the performers? Let's say that I do like certain performers. Can I search by those, or can I mark them as favorite and look for music this way? That's basically leads me to what I wanted to ask. Can you find your favorite composer there on your platform in under 30 seconds?
If you listen to something, then we always have recommended content, of course, which would be more depending on your tastes, of course, but also on the time that you have. So it would be a work, an album, an article with music, or a video. So it's a bit broader. And as time goes, we'll invest more on our algorithm. Then for the performers, I can't even tell you how many performers we have. It's tens of thousands. So we hope that we have the one that you want and that you'll be able to find him. And the ultimate question was, can you find it in less than 30 seconds? We're definitely working on it. It's one of our obsessions, finding as quickly as possible something you will like. It doesn't mean something you liked and you want to listen again. It's something worth your time afterwards. And that's a great challenge, which requires not only music skills, it's also the product and the customer experience. Everything is involved. And so today, is it less than 30 seconds? No. And does it have to be less than 30 seconds? I don't know. I would say that anything in less than 45 minutes, 1 minute, so that you still have some time to have a choice, basically, and to weigh different possibilities, that would be great. What we're trying to do is that if we compare with Netflix, the time to pick something with my wife is probably a topic of divorce, actually. So I know that a lot of people are facing this. Netflix is arguing that they're actually doing a super good job in making people choose super quickly. So we wouldn't have stats about how it goes for other services, but it's true that it's super important. It's super important.
All right, then. So what is your favorite pieces of classical music? You already mentioned one or two examples. You hinted maybe a less favorite as well. So which one is the most favorite?
So my favorite composer would definitely be Beethoven. His life, what he had to go through, is a source of daily inspiration for me. And so all of his music, I would say, if I had to go on a desert island, I would ask to have at least one recording of all of his works. And if I have to name just one piece in particular, I think it would be his violin concerto, as I said, especially the first movement, which is. I don't know if it's the best piece, but it's the very first time I was a teenager. It's the very first time that I understood how music can be like this emotional elevator, and that you can go through so many emotions just in 10 or 15 minutes. It's crazy. And for this particular piece, it's more than an elevator. It's like a spinning machine. It goes you fast forward so much. So I would say the intensity really struck me, and it's one of the pieces I go back to very often. You can definitely, for those who want, you can send me an email, gd@vialma.com. I will gladly offer you a trial and some recommendations about my favorite performances for this particular piece.
Oh, brilliant. So this is the great idea. Now I'm going to be the party pooper and bringing you back to the ground, right? So where are you on your journey in terms of fundraising, the money, the hiring, things like this?
Okay, so we raised 3.5 million euros so far. We are 24. We're fully remote, so if you want to join Vialma, you can be wherever you want in the world. We've got a great developer in Vietnam, another one in Nigeria, a team in London, in Paris. COVID, of course, accelerated much of this. And so currently we're looking for a senior growth manager and a UX researcher or product designer, depending on your background, and as many B2B partnership managers as possible.
Yeah, so wonderful. So where can then people find you, find out more about Vialma and the job opportunities you mentioned?
So they can, on my LinkedIn profile, but my last name is so complicated, Descottes. They will see the job offers, or they can send me an email, gd@vialma.com.
All right. So thanks for repeating the email again. And anyway, I'll put the links in the show notes as well. So thank you very much, Guillaume.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to Voice of FinTech podcast. If you haven't already, check out also voiceoffintech.com, where you will find all the episodes and additional resources related to the podcast. You can also subscribe to Voice of FinTech on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, or any other podcast app that you like. If you have any suggestions on the topics or guests, or how to make this podcast better for you, please email us at info@voiceoffintech.com. Happy to hear from you. Thank you.